Let's go through the films of Steven Spielberg for a moment. I'll point out what I think of many of them. I've probably done this before on the channel and somewhat recently also, although I just feel like doing so again, as the context is just slightly important, seeing where Minority Report fits into his overall immensely iconic body of work. I do like some of the early telefilm stuff, LA 2017, obviously Duel. I think most of us like Duel. Something Evil and Savage, and then you had the major titans that were Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, eventually followed by Raiders of the Lost Ark and Indiana Jones in the Temple of Doom. I don't mind Empire of the Sun, but the overly sentimental, banally, starry-eyed characteristics of Spielberg's work really began to coalesce here. They had already in E.T. and potentially also in The Colour Purple, although by Empire of the Sun it would become clear that this was to be a constant mostly across Spielberg's films going forward. Two highly lauded films in '93, Jurassic Park and then also Schindler's List. The callous contrast between the two, the necessary for most of us compartmentalization, or lack of it takes to helm both in the same year was probably gnawed at very cleverly by the zines of the time, and probably rightfully so. All the same, just assessed in a vacuum, if that were possible, Jurassic Park is stellar, highly memorable entertainment, still one of the three best dinosaur movies, quite plausibly, and Schindler's List remains Spielberg's entry into the annals of wholly distinguished, serious, introspective, and socio-cultural examination cinema, perhaps the only time he really meaningfully did so, at least in a non-genre context, even if the European auteurs hated it and intended to hate it, and while if there might be some potentially valid criticisms of Schindler's List, its convicted seriousness as a project I don't think can be devalued, and if it was in some way exploitative, it was in the film's marketing and exaltation as a cultural event for the privileged classes, not in what it would have meant to Spielberg himself, who, for all his detached billionaire blindness, probably was as sincere as a broke, emotionally overflowing poet when he was composing the wholly bold, for Hollywood, Schindler's List. The Lost World has some major flaws, but its money shots for dino sequences are pretty terrific, I've always thought. And then 2001's AI. I recently uploaded a video on that. Go check that out if you're inclined. Want to hear my further thoughts on that picture. And that brings us to Minority Report here. Well, firstly, let's just cover some of the stuff which was released after Minority Report, after 2002. At one time I could admire the filmic attributes of Munich, although now it makes me sick to my stomach. I'm sure that in the 2 or more decades after the Second World War it would have sickened one to witness any of Riefenstahl's admittedly ambitious cinematic undertakings, and I feel this way about Spielberg's Munich in the present moment. I cannot perceive art focused on the state of Israel in a vacuum at the moment, and I'm not sure if any of us should for the time being. And then The Fabelmans from 2022 is the most I've enjoyed a Spielberg film after Munich. It is not a particularly great film, but a rather decent work. It is fascinating to have the pathos examined autobiographically of one of the most iconic and influential storytellers of all time, possibly the most influential alive, alongside his close friend George Lucas, and maybe some of those comic book authors of the 60s, if any of them are still alive, which sadly I don't think they are. A fairly likeable title, although it was among a low standard of films which Spielberg put out for the most part during the 21st century. Between Munich and The Fabelmans, between 2005 and 2022, you had Crystal Skull, crap, and I'm not really crazy about Last Crusade either, honestly, so if Crystal Skull, it's not like I'm mad that it isn't what had come before. We've had subparish indie films or film before, and I didn't feel like another one, or one after that. Warhorse, yuck, the most ugly Spielbergian Spielberg movie ever, and who the bloody hell needs it? Tintin. Noel Oakeshott really liked Tintin. He liked the old stories in general, absolutely loved them, and he liked this film too. I don't mind it, it is fun enough, but it doesn't enchant me overly. It feels like a basic going through the motions of adventure films, which some may praise it for, but it didn't do a whole lot for me compared with what I wanted it to do for me, I suppose. Lincoln was boring as batshit, I don't need it, don't make me sit through that damn thing ever again. Bridge of Spies, sentimental moments, who needs it, you know? The BFG, again, I don't need it, and no disrespect to Roald Dahl, I just can't be bothered with a sentimental Spielberg take on one or any of his texts. The Post, oh my fucking god, who needs it? Ready Player One, some good ideas techno-aesthetically, but he feels way too out of touch, and the feel-good components make my stomach crawl, and I don't have the greatest time watching it, sadly. West Side Story, oh, just shoot me now. No, really, back onto Minority Report. So unless you count Blade Runner 2049, this is the best film based on Philip K. Dick's work released during the 21st century, and I do like Linklater's A Scanner Darkly, to be fair, which is more than I can say for most of Linklater's films, but we'll get to that later, won't we? And it's probably in some respects a better film than Verhoeven's Total Recall, even if the latter is ultimately more fun to watch. It obviously has nothing on the original Blade Runner, well, director's cut from 1992, or certainly on, if this counts as a Philip K. Dick adaptation, the 1987 feature Morning Patrol from the Greek original author Nikos Nikolaides. The film's dialogue contained excerpts from authors such as Dick, Daphne du Maurier, Raymond Chandler, and Herman Rauscher. That is a spellbinding film. I highly, highly recommend all of you go and seek it out if you are so able to. Is it the best film Tom Cruise ever starred in? No, that would be Eyes Wide Shut, Collateral, or Legend, although Minority Report might be the only other worthwhile film he was ever in, along with maybe one or two of the Mission Impossible films, the first one by De Palma and the fourth one, Ghost Protocol, directed by Brad Bird. Scenes featuring his protagonist replacing their eyes' retinas in time before some spidery robots come to scan them, looking for him, a fugitive, a sequence of him rescuing one of the precogs, and a flashback of him losing sight and missing his son forever are among the most memorable in all of Spielberg's long career. It's got Tom Cruise, it sucks. It's too serious and not from the 80s, it sucks. It has a happy ending and isn't quite Blade Runner or the best works from Philip K. Dick as an author, it sucks. I'm less interested in those knee-jerk responses from the snobby nerds of the old IMDb and more in what it is doing, simply in of itself, regardless of whether it holds up to a standard born of a handful of films I saw before I was like 16. In that respect, Minority Report is watchable as hell, consistently admirable, and really rather memorable. Actually, yes, I debated in my AI video whether I considered this, that, or this the better Spielberg film for the 21st century. The one I would soonest pop on is almost certainly, assuming I'd seen all of them recently enough that one doesn't peek out from the others and demand a revisiting, is this one, 2002's Minority Report, a really commendable effort from a man who was once the most well-known filmmaker alive. And along with Tarantino, the Coen brothers, George Lucas, and Martin Scorsese, he actually probably still is